Namaste. Hello everyone. Welcome to Shalgulhati, Shiva and Mysticism for another episode of Monday with Mahadev. Last time I told you a story which I had written called The Truth Seeker, which was about a young boy who became a monk and went away into the mountains to a monastery where there was a great master who would give a map every year to the best boy of the year, and that map would lead them to the cave of God, and where there was a very precious sighting of a jewel of God. And the master had told everyone that the color of the jewel is red. But this boy, who, when he got the chit, the map, everybody was jealous of him because he had been there only for a year. But the master had seen his keenness and he thought that he deserves the map. And when the boy went to find this great jewel of God, he came back and said that he had sighted it, but that the jewel was actually blue. And the lesson of the story was that our spiritual masters, our preceptors, our gurus, our rishis, munis, they tell us whatever they know about consciousness and God and divinity, and they write it down in their sacred texts. And of course, they never tell us wrong things, but sometimes they can leave a little decoy or a little snitch just so that they can see whether we are serious about finding our own spirituality. The master can only give the map, he cannot walk the trek for you. Even the Buddha said something like this when he taught his disciples. He said, in your quest for your own Buddhahood, leave everything aside, leave the text aside if you have to, leave even me aside if you have to, but just find your own Buddhahood. Now today, I'm going to tell you a story about Mahadev that elaborates this story that I had told you last week. Now, as we all know, Swami Vivekananda, who was a great spiritual being, who was a dynamo, a cyclone of spirituality, Sai as in S-A-I, which means God, clone, which means in the image of God. So he was like a cyclone, and that's another way of seeing the word cyclone, which is a weather body which can upturn everything. But another way of seeing it is that when God sends somebody like Swami Vivekananda, he is so much in his own image that whatever he tells us helps us so much to find God and to find our own divinity. Now, Swamiji often used to tell his Guru Bhais lots of sacred texts and also his own spiritual experiences. One of his favorites was Sister Nivedita, who was an Irish lady who was actually Elizabeth Noble, and she was named Sister Nivedita by him. And after Swami Vivekananda left his mortal frames, she wrote a beautiful book called Cradle Tales of Hinduism. And that book has a few chapters, one on Shiva, one on Vishnu, one on Mata, and so on. In the chapter on Shiva, Sister Nivedita gives a description of Mahadev. And she says that in wild and lonely places where there is nobody, where what we call ekant, you may sight Shiva sitting by himself in dhyana, in chintan, in meditation. And he has little or no belongings. For in the matters of the world, he is not very conscious, he is not very smart. But in matters spiritual, none can befool him. And then finally she says, one look in his eyes, and that is how you can tell that this whom you met was Shiva himself. Those eyes are full of spirituality. She goes on to tell a story about Shiva. She says, who does Shiva keep meditating on? For whose welfare does Shiva meditate? And he meditates for the welfare of this entire universe, for all of us. And once it is said that Shiva was meditating so hard for the welfare of the universe that he realized that there is no universe. He went into a state of total transcendence where there was only consciousness, only the Shiva Tattva, only Chaitanyam, only Prakasha, only luminosity, and there was no created universe. And thereafter, he got up. This is what Nivedita writes. He got up and said, Bom Bom, and started to dance, a dance of great happiness. And that is why when we talk of Mahadev, we also say Bom Bom Hara Hara. We use the words that he used, Bom Bom, and we add Hara Hara, which is Shiva's name. This is what Nivedita writes. But when I read this, I meditated upon this. It was the most beautiful text that I had read on Shiva. It was like someone has met Shiva and written this. And it was obvious to me that her master Swami Vivekananda must have told her this. Then I meditated more. I read the text again and again. And I realized one thing. And I wrote it down on the same book. And what I realized was that when there is the end of one universe and Shiva is all alone by himself, he may perhaps get up and dance his tandav. He may say Bom Bom. But how can really we say that it is a dance of great happiness? It may also be a dance of remorse. It may not just be Anand Tandav, it may be a dance of memory, a dance of remembering all his universe. It may well be a dance of a bit of sadness. And I thought that this is the kind of decoy that Swami Vivekananda may have put for Nivedita, just so that we can wonder if and when God is alone by himself, what kind of dance does he do? Because when Sister Nivedita wrote this, and she had written a sentence before this that there was no universe, it struck me, when there was no universe, who must have reported this dance of Shiva? And therefore I realized it must have been the great Swami Vivekananda, who in his meditations must have seen this divine sight, must have known what was the real mood of Shiva, and then he must have related this to Nivedita, and she wrote it down as honestly as she could, as beautifully as she could, so that we can benefit, but still left a little question mark, a little gap in that map for us to go inside our own consciousness and see what happens when God alone is. And yes, when somebody goes into transcendence, it is like a dance of consciousness. It is absolutely true that there is a great joy. We call it Sat Chit Ananda, consciousness, knowing itself to be the truth is bliss. Sat is truth, Chit is consciousness, and Ananda is bliss. So Sat Chit Ananda, the expression that the yogis use when they go into dhyana, means consciousness gets blissed when it gets to know itself. That is correct. But what we need to think is what happens in that cosmic second after that, when Shiva knows that he is consciousness, when he knows that one creation is now done with, what mood is he in before he likes to create another universe? I would reckon this is the spiritual question, this is the spiritual decoy. God also has feeling for us, just like we have feeling for him. Some people who do bhakti would know, sometimes you go to a temple, you have a sighting of God, and you see that your eyes are watering. There are involuntary tears. So that feeling cannot be called sadness, it cannot be called happiness, it is a great mix of both. And this is what led me to understand Shiva's dance alone, when one universe has ended and another one is beginning, is not just a dance of only happiness, not just Satchit Ananda, but also one of Shivaloka Unmilana, also one of recreation after using one's memory about all those that Shiva has loved, and that would entail a little bit of sadness before a new universe came in. This is what I think. Join me again next Monday, and I will be back with yet another Shiva wisdom for you. Om Namah Shivaya.